There was something off about this woman. The way she would wander this neighborhood, the way she would look at me. I wish I never followed that woman. I wish I never met her. And I turn my flashlight and it illuminates this. But I'll be quick. If you're ready to suspend your disbelief and become fully immersed in today's adventure, you've found your new favorite channel. We post once a week, but there's plenty on the channel to binge. So if you're ready, like the video for good luck, because you're gonna need it. And make sure you subscribe so you never miss an upload. Enjoy the show. Warning. This story is very loosely based on true events. These events are very disturbing and not for the faint-hearted. You see, my life has been chaos from the moment that I can remember. One of my first core memories consists of this fake, half-freak of a cousin trying to drown me in a pool that had an air mattress recklessly floating in it. I remember being under that thing and the floaties that were on my little arms being pinned to the bottom of the air mattress, fully submerged in the water. And the friction that my floaties were creating on the bottom of this mattress was too much for my little legs to propel me to the gap that could get me to the air. My sister saved me that day. Another core memory I have is a group of teenagers cornering some random kid and forcing him to fight. And I'm just standing there as a little kid and they're repeatedly snapping his head back with every punch that they landed because they put Bic lighters in their fists to make them more dense. They kept making the kid attempt to fight back and it went on for 30 minutes until they left this kid leaking on the ground with a knot on every inch of his face. He was on his hands and knees, half conscious, looking at little 8-year-old me playing Foursquare by myself. I didn't know what to do other than sit with him for a while so he didn't feel alone. We didn't say a word. No one saved him that day. I have no idea why this type of chaos finds me, but it does. It feels like a never-ending cycle of other people's problems finding me and becoming mine. No matter what I do, I meet people on their worst day. I'm at the wrong place at the wrong time. But no matter how much chaos comes to me, I've always felt like a spectator in it. Like these tragic things are occurring in front of me, but the consequences will never reach me. I feel like the cameraman, like the cameraman never dies. He's just there capturing the chaos that's unfolding. And no matter how hard I tried to stay out of trouble, I couldn't. And it's not like my parents didn't notice this pattern in me. I could see it on their faces. I could remember the feelings on their face. Like, why can't this kid stay out of trouble? Why is he never home? Why can't we wrangle him? It's like no matter what friend he goes out with, whatever event he goes to, the trouble finds him. And this problem with the troubled teen gets magnified, especially when your parents have to separate from each other due to work for an extended period of time. And them as a couple have to decide which one of us is going to have to put up with this kid alone. And my parents had to make that decision the summer going into my sophomore year of high school. They just removed me from the high school that I was at because they tried throwing me in private school for a year, but they decided to remove me because I never had any homework. And I guess my parents thought that they were paying the private school for homework and not a safe place with edible food. So it was back to public school for me with less than zero homework, way more dangerous and not an ounce of edible food coming through those doors. Back to Pop-Tarts, hot Cheetos, and padlocks to the front teeth for bumping into the wrong person for me. But I still had an entire summer before heading back to the hellhole that is Chicago public schools. And that summer, my mom had to go to Phoenix for a month for work. It was because some company bought the company that she worked for, so she had to go there to train under some new software that this new company was using, or something along those lines. The moral of it was that she had to work 10-hour days in a different city to speed run learning this new software to keep her job and keep a roof over our heads. A true warrior, my mom is, the work that she put in to raise me. And on top of all of that pressure in her workplace, she had to bring me along with her. My dad had volunteered to teach summer school that year, so he didn't have the summer off as he usually did. He wasn't going to be around to keep me in check, so them, as a unit, as a couple, decided the better idea is to ship me off to Phoenix with her, where I don't know anybody there and I can't really get in trouble. And they're smart. They only gave me 2-hour notice before this flight, so before I knew it, they packed my bags for me and I landed in the desert. And to be fair, that was the way to do it. Don't tell me a thing, because if they did, I would have been like, that's the day that we're leaving. I'm sneaking out of the house that day. I'm hiding in the local woods until my mom has to go to the airport because I know she's not going to miss the flight. I could stay anyway. I would not have gotten on that plane if they gave me more than 2 hours notice. I would have done anything in my power to stay in Chicago with my friends. I had this weird understanding of how the world worked at a very young age. I was very logical, but I used this early understanding in defiance, in any way I could. I remember being in first grade and the teacher telling me that something was going on my permanent record. And little me is thinking, this lady is full of it. There is no way that she has any level of authority outside of this classroom. Like, I vividly remember thinking, as a small kid, I don't believe her, I don't like her, and I'm not going to listen to her. And if I knew that there was a flight to Phoenix with my name on it, I was going to disappear. And then I would reappear only during my dad's work hours so I could eat and sleep at the house, but I would avoid him for long enough that he would cool down and I wouldn't get a scolding from him. But my parents knew me way too well. They wrangled me, they blindsided me, and before I knew it, I landed at Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix, Arizona. But we weren't staying in Phoenix, we were staying in a suburb called Peoria. And the company that bought my mom's company was nice enough to put us up in a nice rental. We had a whole house. And this neighborhood that we were staying in was so much different than anything that I'd ever seen. I was so used to Chicago that runs on a simple grid and has really accessible public transportation. Like, the whole city has grid-style streets running north, south, east, west, and obviously there's a couple diagonal streets and some cul-de-sacs if you go into very specific neighborhoods, but it's very different than the way Phoenix is set up. Everywhere in Chicago feels accessible and public, but Peoria was so different. Every single neighborhood was like its own cluster of homes that gave it a private community feel. And some of the communities are even gated, like you can't go in there unless you're from there. Ours wasn't gated, but when we arrived, it felt like we were trespassing driving through. Like, all the neighbors are outside, everybody seems to know each other. Every street runs into a cul-de-sac and a no outlet. Like, there's no access to this neighborhood other than the one street that we took into this cluster. And I'm used to Chicago with the narrow streets, the identical brick houses. Peoria, in this neighborhood that I arrived in, every house was very similar. They had these earth tones and stucco walls. It felt so Southwest. And there was a surprising amount of palm trees. Not a surprising amount of cactus. There was tons of cactus, but the palm trees was a pleasant surprise. And to be honest, it was so much nicer than what I was used to. But in a way, it was very restricting to me. I was used to being able to get to wherever I wanted, whenever I wanted. But in Phoenix, you need a car to get anywhere. And I didn't have a car, let alone a license at the time. So I was confined to this little private neighborhood. So almost immediately, knowing that I can't get out of this area, I start scouting the neighborhood for potential friends. There was no way I was spending an entire month of my summer inside doing nothing, just sitting around twiddling my thumbs waiting for mommy to get home. I was like a hyperactive dog at that age. I still am now, to be honest. I need stimulation and activity, otherwise I get very testy and have trouble relaxing. I was really hoping there was going to be a lot of kids my age around the neighborhood, but as I was going around scouting, I wasn't seeing any potential prospects. This area seemed to be a very young family area, just young couples with very young children, or old retired couples poking around their garage enjoying their retired hobbies. It wasn't looking good for me at that point. It was looking like I was in for an incredibly boring month. But that was until I saw her for the first time. And I know that last sentence sounded like I found a potential summer fling, but that is very far from the truth. I found an individual that deeply confused me at the time. I was only 16, so when you see a 50-year-old full-grown woman dressed like a little girl, wearing all pink with pigtails, riding a bike with training wheels, you get very curious about what's up with her. And I wasn't sure if she was doing a bit at first, but as she rode by me for the first time, I could tell that something was off with her. And the reason I say that is because this woman, this 50-year-old woman, was oddly rude to me. I made eye contact with her. She didn't say anything. She just rode past me, shaking her head at me, with a facial expression that conveyed bully-like disapproval. The energy she was giving off was neighborhood mean girl that is too cool to be nice to anybody. But the only issue here was that she was clearly in her late 40s, early 50s. Actually, there was plenty of other issues. The childlike attire, the training wheels, the pigtails. There was a lot going on with her that didn't add up, including her clear and unwarranted disdain for me and my presence. But within a few seconds, I knew that she was not doing a bit. This is who this woman was, and she owned it. And over the course of my first week there, I saw this woman every single day. And she was zipping around the neighborhood like she was a busy DoorDash driver with places to be. And every time she rode by me, as I'm trying to find friends in this neighborhood that I've never been to, she'd give me this same nasty look and shake her head at me. And then as it progressed, she'd even stop and watch to see where I was headed at times. Just this odd older woman peeking around neighborhood corners, keeping tabs on me. And then whenever we got close, just And when I would be like, yo, what? She'd zoom off with her loud training wheels. And there was nothing stealthy about this woman. I could hear her coming from down the block. And I'm sure you've come to the same conclusion that I did already. This woman clearly struggled with some type of mental health or some type of development issue that must have stunted her maturity or her brain development. It was clear as day that she wasn't exactly normal. And even at 16, I had the maturity to recognize that and not be cruel to this woman. But I can't sit here and act like it didn't bother me a bit. But the reason it bothered me wasn't the type of creepiness that she gave off. It was the fact that she didn't even give me a chance. Like, come on, lady, you're dressed like dad riding around on training wheels and you're shaking your head at me like I'm the problem. And I remember thinking I would have been nothing but nice to you, but you didn't even give our friendship a chance, scowling at me from day one. And to give you a better idea of why this situation was so confusing to navigate, I have to tell you about her appearance. And it wasn't just her clothing and hairstyle choices. Her overall appearance didn't give me any indication that she was challenged. She didn't have any facial features that were clear signs of an intellectual disability. Like, if you changed her hairstyle and gave her a nice like two-piece woman's suit, she could be a lawyer. She'd blend in fine. She looked like a regular middle-aged woman doing an odd caricature of a neighborhood mean girl. It was almost as if she was cosplaying. So you could imagine that this woman was a fascinating person to observe, especially when you're in a state where you know nobody, you're 16 with nothing else to do. You kind of hone in on the very unique, weird woman that keeps flying by your house on training wheels. So that's exactly what I did. I watched this odd woman zoom around the neighborhood, coming back to her house, which was just a couple houses down from mine, every couple hours or so, refilling her backpack with seemingly new chalk to draw with. And as I'm observing her, I'm seeing that her facial expression is so focused that she is just so honed in on whatever activities that she's doing. And she'd just be intensely scowling in her own world, pouring sweat from all the bike riding she was doing. And the craziest part was she'd also be going out at night sometimes as well. It wasn't strictly a daytime thing. It was very random. Sometimes she would do a lot during the day. Sometimes she would do a lot at night. But at least it seemed random until we caught her. My mom and I randomly decided to get In-N-Out Burger one night, and as we were pulling out of our driveway, I saw a white bike tire lying on the side of the house as if there was a bike laying on its side there. So I tell my mom to stop the car, stop backing out. I hop out of the car to see what's going on. And as I get a better view of the side of the house, I see the woman-child's bike laying on its side with the back wheel still spinning. And the lady crouching near our AC unit, reaching into her little backpack for something. And whatever it was that she grabbed from her little backpack, she reached and tucked it in between the AC unit and the house as if she was trying to hide it. So when I confronted her, asking about what she was doing, she scurried over to her bike, picked it up, and started to flee the scene. And it's not like she took off running or riding her bike away. She was just speed walking, still holding her bike handles, looking back at me every few steps with a look on her face like I got in the way of something important. Like I was a nuisance and she was wrongfully being called out. And right away, my mom and I went back there to see what she was doing, and the AC unit was mangled. All the wiring and tubes were either yanked out or torn up, which is a major inconvenience when you're in Phoenix in the summertime for your first time. So I came to the conclusion immediately that this girl had a real vendetta against me or us. Like, why would she maim our AC unit like that? It was such a specifically cruel thing to do to us. And she had no motive to do it. I didn't do anything to her but ask her like, what's up? Why do you keep staring at me? We had done nothing to this girl, and unless somebody could come fix this AC unit ASAP, we were about to have a very uncomfortable few days. I almost forgot that I saw her stash something because I was so shocked about the AC, but I shoved my hand into the crevice that she stuffed it, and I pulled out this weird wooden block with an even weirder carving in it. And I'm just looking down at this wooden block, and it fits right in the palm of my hand. It was about the size of an old flip phone folded up, and the carving seemed to be some type of made-up language, or they were reminiscent of like hieroglyphs. I guess it did look more like hieroglyphs than a language, but it was very amateur in general. It was almost as if a mentally stunted woman carved it with a switchblade in 20 minutes before cutting our AC unit's power lines with that same dull switchblade. And the cherry on top of all of it was while we were still on the side of the house inspecting the damage that she had done, she had frantically come back and started scribbling those same hieroglyphs that were on this little weird wooden plank in chalk on our driveway. The behavior was so odd, but the oddest part was the clear intention behind each action. She had that same focus that I would always see on her face when she would be on her way zooming somewhere. She had a clear motive and goal in mind, which was punched home by the fact that when we were still on the side of the house and she was looking back to see if we went back there before fully fleeing, she saw that we went back there, she came back, and she had to finish her little chalk drawing on the driveway. She didn't care if she got caught. She set out to do these 3 particular tasks, and she did not care who saw her, and she didn't stop until she was completely finished. My mom and I felt so violated by this. We were so far from home, and we didn't know anybody in the area, and this random person carried out this weird, incredibly inconvenient, and thoroughly thought out vandalism on our temporary house. It's not like we moved into the neighborhood and started causing problems right away. We hadn't done anything to deserve this. But when something like that happens and we have no backstory on the person that did it, other than the fact that they dress up like a little girl, you get insecure and start to wonder if you've done something wrong. Like maybe there is something that we did that we didn't know we did that isn't normal and we rubbed some of the neighbors the wrong way. But even with the insecurity flying around, you still call the police because you can't let something like that slide, even if you're an outsider to the area. Like drawing chalk is one thing, but cutting major wires to a major device that cools our house in the place that we're staying for the entire month is a completely different thing. So we had to report it, even if it meant getting this disabled woman in trouble and getting further on the neighbor's bad side. Like who knows, maybe a visit from the police will scare this woman straight and she won't do this to anybody else. So the cops show up, we show them the vandalism, they talk to the woman child's family, and then they come back to us and tell us a absolutely devastating story. The cop fills us in on this poor woman's story. He goes, guys, the girl that you found on the outside of your house this evening is named Victoria. Victoria has lived in this neighborhood her entire life, and everybody that moves here goes through the learning curve that you're going through right now. You see, Victoria is not all there anymore, but she still deeply cares about all of her neighbors and everybody that lives here. She had a very serious accident on this block when she was about 11 years old. She was playing make-believe by herself when she ran into the street and she got struck by a car. The car fled the scene and left her there unconscious. By the time her mom found her, she had stopped breathing and it took 8 whole minutes for the ambulance to get to her. She was pronounced dead at the scene, but somehow she woke up before they even put her in the ambulance. And the entire neighborhood used to call her their little miracle while she was still young. But most of the people that lived here then don't live here now. She didn't seem to mature past the age that the accident happened, so she's really difficult to communicate with. But her mom assured us that all she has done since that accident is try to keep the neighborhood safe. So what happened to her never happens to somebody else. This story was so sad, but it also didn't make much sense to me. I totally understand giving somebody the benefit of the doubt and giving somebody grace who went through something so tragic. But to so confidently act that she means no harm and she's just trying to keep the neighborhood safe after she just cut wires outside of our house is ridiculous. So I said exactly that. Like I told you, at that age, I called things out if I disagreed. I felt like I saw through the BS, so I stood up for myself and my mom. And I very sarcastically and aggressively said, so you're just gonna let this slide because she's a miracle baby from 40 years ago? Dude, she was snooping around our house and vandalizing. Go do your job and arrest her, scare her, set her straight. She's clearly targeting us. I made sure that I said this loud enough for her and her family to hear, and also the snooping neighbors that are peeking out of their windows to hear. I didn't exactly want this woman arrested. I just wanted to scare her so she didn't mess with us anymore. And to be real, I was 16 and I wanted to look cool and tough, talking back to a police officer, letting everybody know how I feel. Like I just grew my first chin hair. I give cops attitude. I'm so cool and mysterious. Man, I'm badass. The cop handled this attitude very quickly and put me in my place faster than Usain Bolt. He said, maybe you were a reminder of the irresponsible prepubescent dork that hit her and drove away all those years ago. Cause you're living in the same house he was. How about you show that woman some empathy and stop reminding her of the kid that ruined her life? I was used to talking back to teachers in horrible school systems that couldn't put me in my place. I'd never experienced the verbal whooping a Southwest police officer could give you. He made me deeply regret on acting out, and he made me reflect on how I treated this situation in general and the way I treated this woman. And most importantly, he showed me how far away I was from being a man at the time. I realized in that moment that if I had to call somebody else to protect me and my family, that also meant I was forfeiting decision-making rights. You're not allowed to call somebody into a situation you can't handle and then tell them how to handle it. They're not your personal security. He also genuinely made me feel bad for her. She had been through something horribly traumatic, and for me to not have AC for a day or two was nothing close to what she's experienced. And my mom was shaken up by the situation because of everything she already had on her plate with work, as well as being so far away from home, and I could tell that she just wanted to get on with it and just have this situation be gone so we could just get back home. The reality was that we were not staying in this neighborhood long term, so ignoring a little neighborly tension was doable. It's not like we were stuck here in a 30-year mortgage. We went and got some In-N-Out Burger after the cops dispersed and everybody went back into their house, and while we were eating, we ordered a Ring camera. We felt like if we had a Ring doorbell that we could talk through from inside, or even if we weren't home, we could see if Victoria was approaching our property and we could scare her away by talking through it. And if it didn't scare her away, we would at least have video proof that she kept coming on our property, and maybe then the cops would have some means to do something about the situation. But having that Ring camera did not do what we thought it was going to do. We thought it would be a deterrent, but what it turned out to be was the cause. If you've never had a Ring doorbell, when you install it, it also comes with an app to your phone. And the app is basically a forum for all of the neighbors to share what's going on in the area. People will post videos and pictures of coyotes in the area, or lost dogs coming into people's backyards, or porch pirates stealing packages. Anything that goes wrong in the neighborhood gets posted on that app, and you could also turn on notifications so you could see in real time whenever somebody posts something going wrong. And since I was stuck in this house bored with nothing else to do, I would check every notification that came in. Anything going down nearby, anything to make life feel exciting, anything to pass time by until I could go home to my friends. And what I realized was Victoria would always leave her house 5 minutes before something went wrong. This is how it would go. Victoria zooms by, 5 minutes pass, Ring notification. Barbecue catches fire in backyard. Victoria zooms by, 5 minutes pass, Ring notification. Irrigation tubes burst, flooding the street. Victoria zooms by, 5 minutes passed, Ring notification. 10 dogs let out of various yards. Victoria zooms by, 5 minutes pass, Ring notification. Gas leak and power lines cut. After the first 3 days and over 10 coincidences lining up perfectly, I was 100% convinced that Victoria was a deranged woman setting out to cause havoc wherever she went. And the first thing that came to my head was, how is no one else noticing that she's doing this? I've only been here like a week, maybe 2, and I'm the only one that's realizing that she's clearly doing this? Has nobody else caught her, or does everybody let her off the hook because of her sob story? I had to know. I had to follow this woman. Over the course of the next few days, I waited patiently for Victoria to spring into action and go off on her next mission. And I had to follow pretty far behind her because this girl is constantly checking her surroundings. She looks like the most motivated, paranoid, petty criminal that's ever walked this earth. Specifically because of how many times she turns around and just peeps her surroundings. And the first time I decided to actually get out there and try to tail her and try to follow her, I was taken aback by how many times I had to hide and find coverage because she would stop pedaling and just check all of her bearings. I thought for sure she knew I was tailing her, but after like the 5th time, I was just like, no, she just does this. It doesn't even matter if I was here looking for her. She's always this paranoid. So I couldn't get really close to her. I knew I had to trail pretty far back, but I would be able to be close enough, going in the right enough direction that once the Ring notification came in, I would be able to get there pretty quickly. And once I would get the notification of the general area, I could hustle to it to try to beat her there, or at least get there before everybody else did and see what she was doing, without it seeming like I was following her there. And every time I would show up to one of these incidents, there would be adults already handling it, neighbors already arguing, police or fire department trying to resolve it, and little old Victoria sitting crisscross on the sidewalk, drawing her hieroglyphs as if she's just an innocent bystander that has nothing to do with the situation that's unfolding. Her appearance and her reputation around the neighborhood seemed to give her a free pass. Nobody would acknowledge her or suspect her of doing anything other than playing with chalk, and she just happens to be here. But I knew the truth, She was doing all of it, and everything that was going wrong in the neighborhood was because of her. All I needed was proof, so I became obsessed with tracking this woman and trying to keep track of all of the crimes she was committing. I would be so bummed when my mom would finally come home at night, not because I didn't want to spend time with my mom, but because I would no longer be able to follow her if she went out to go do something. It was especially annoying because it seemed as if she did her most heinous work at night. The ones during the day were mostly light work. A hose turned on here, a dog let out of a gate there, maybe a tire popped down the road. But at night, it would be straight up arson attempts sometimes. It was clear she took much more risk at night, and for some reason at night she would be much more violent. The things that she would do were way riskier, way more life-threatening. But I couldn't follow her to those crimes. I was stuck in the house once my mom came home. She would be asking about what I was doing. I was not allowed to leave. So I was stuck watching her zoom by and watching the crimes unfold from my phone. I felt like a detective closing in on his perp, and Victoria, dude, this girl was my mortal enemy, and I was gonna close this case. And she was giving my life purpose. She was making my summer meaningful. I was gonna be the one to take her down. I was the only one that could do it. I was the only person in this neighborhood that saw through her facade. So it's 2 a.m. I'm looking out my window like I'm a vigilante. I'm Batman, ready to take out some petty Gotham perps when I hear her little training wheels coming by. So she zooms by and I'm watching her with pure disdain in my heart as she gets to go to her next victim's house with zero resistance. She disappears out of my sight to the left of my window, and I'm considering pulling this window open, hopping down off the second floor and getting after her. Just pumping the arms and going high knees, chasing her down, stopping her once and for all. But right as I'm about to act on this impulse, I see another person zoom by. And this person zooms by on an electric scooter wearing all black head to toe with seemingly night vision goggles on their head. I only saw this person for about 2 seconds before they were out of sight as well, but they were clearly going in the same direction as Victoria. So was somebody else onto her as well? Was he going to try to chase her down and catch her tonight? Did I just find an ally in my war against Victoria? I had to know, but I just didn't know how to get out of this house quietly. I knew all the ways out of my house at home. I could sneak out from any window, any door. I knew my way around it. But this house was completely armed with a security system, and my mom would arm it before she went to bed, so I couldn't leave. And obviously she wouldn't tell me the code to it because she knew my tendency for sneaking out. So I'm tiptoeing around this house trying to find any chink in this house's armor. I'm having no luck, but then I start to hear people shouting at each other out front, and I get a notification on my Ring app at the same time, so I tiptoe sprint back upstairs into my room to check this notification and look who is yelling out front of my house. And I could still hear people shouting and arguing, but I can't see them. So I quickly checked the Ring app from the notification that came up, and I could see that people in the neighborhood are reporting black smoke coming from nearby. Then I start hearing the sirens entering the neighborhood from police or firefighters, whoever it is, and the people that were shouting that I heard from downstairs come in front of the house, and they're having a full-blown argument right below my window. So I duck so they don't see me, so they don't think I'm snooping on their conversation, and I start listening from our video doorbell's microphone so I could hear them more clearly. In the first few sentences, I couldn't tell what they were talking about because I caught them mid-conversation out of context, but I clearly understood a female voice saying, "Stop following me, you don't know what you're doing," followed by a man's voice saying, "I know that you're working with them. I'm going to catch them." I couldn't help but to peek out the window to get a glimpse of the guy and then also make sure it was Victoria, because this was the first time I heard her talk. I didn't even know she could talk up to this point. So I popped my big stupid head up right out of the window looking down at them, and the movement catches their eye right away. And I don't think they knew that I could hear them so clearly through the doorbell that was coming through my phone, because the guy said, "This guy's onto you too, he's been following you." And she immediately rebutted, "He's clueless," before storming off like she was throwing a temper tantrum. And the guy was standing at the edge of my driveway looking up at me, smirking at me before he gave me like a little salute, and then slowly walked across the street into his front door. And his door in his house just so happened to be right across the street and 3 houses to the right. It seemed as if he purposely showed me where he lived so we could team up. And I was so pumped to have a teammate in this now, especially because I just found out Victoria was playing dumb and could talk this whole time. There was no way me and my new bud were gonna let her get away with this. In my head, I have somebody else on my side and we're gonna team up and we're gonna take this lady down. I could barely sleep with how excited I was to go meet this kid the next day. But I finally managed to fall asleep. I managed to let my mind start racing, but I wake up in the morning. My mom's already gone for work, so I could do whatever I want till nighttime comes around. I shower up, I hydrate up, and I walk my little tush across the street to my new best friend's house. And as I'm about to walk up to the house, I see a hand sticking out of a window on the side of his house. And the hand is clearly like trying to get my attention, like telling me to come to the side of their property opposed to the front door. So I hustle over to it and I hear the same voice that I heard the night before telling me, yo, you gotta climb up. And the hand that was sticking out of the window pulls back behind the curtain that it was protruding out of. So I just jump up, grab the window frame and start pulling myself up. So I pull myself up until my chin is over the ledge and I try to get a good idea of what the room looks like to scope it out before I send myself into it. But these drapes or curtains or whatever the ones that you call them that go all the way to the floor were completely blocking my vision into this house. I thought it was a little bit odd in the moment that he didn't move the curtain for me to help me climb in, but I just went on with it. I got my stomach onto the ledge and I basically like front flip somersaulted into the room. And even when I landed on the floor, the curtains were still in front of me. I still couldn't see my surroundings. So I sat up and I swam through the curtains in order to see the room. And when I finally parted the seas of these curtains, I was met with a barrel of a sawed-off. I didn't know what to say. I'm sitting there looking up at this kid who has this barrel to my face. I couldn't see anything behind, just the barrel of this shotgun. It was the only thing in focus in my vision and everything around it was a complete blur. The figure behind it, the room behind it, the only thing that was vivid was the 2 points of this barrel of a shotgun. And that same voice that told me to come up into this window reached over me, slammed the window behind me, and barked at me, "Who sent you?" I didn't know what else to say in this situation other than, "I thought you needed my help." And this guy follows up with, "Are you scared?" And I'm still just looking up down the barrel of this sawed-off and I reply, "Yeah, dude." And this guy has the audacity to say, "You shouldn't be. You're on scare tactics," before tossing the gun onto the bed and laughing hysterically in my face. And I saw once he tossed the gun, when I was able to see the full thing, it was clearly fake, but I couldn't tell when the barrel was just in my face. He thought his joke was hilarious, and clearly he had been waiting years to use it. I didn't find it nearly as funny as he did, so I get to my feet as fast as possible. And he followed up by saying, "You know that show? No, you're too young to know that show." I was not too young for scare tactics. I watched it all the time, but I wasn't feeling like I needed to correct him in this moment. I was still trying to figure out what kind of person I was dealing with. So I quickly start scanning his room, just trying to get any idea of who this person is, and the place is filled with 90s, early 2000s memorabilia. And in that moment, I knew exactly what kind of guy I was dealing with. He was the stereotypical dude that didn't grow up and still lives with his parents. I'm not sure if anybody else has dealt with this type of guy, but he was the type of guy that was very immature for people his age, but would act super mature around his younger siblings' friends. You know, like that kid, that random friend's older brother that's always in his basement, and when you go down there, he acts like he's the smartest dude alive. And it's literally just because they've watched The Matrix and Fight Club like 1,000 times, and like that's what they base their manly reality on. But the reality is that they're unemployed and smoking pot at their parents' house, trying to red pill their younger siblings' friends. This dude was exactly that. He's just YouTube rabbit hole guy trying to take people's innocence and acts like he's super smart. He looked like he went to Woodstock 99 and headbanged to Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit. I want to make this clear, no hate to Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit, they had some great tracks. But this dude had a bookshelf in his room decorated with bongs, and his ceiling was covered in glow-in-the-dark stars that were shaped like weed plants. And he was wearing an oversized Metallica graphic tee with red flannel pajama pants. I deeply regretted climbing into this stinky room with this weirdo, who's sitting in the corner of the room in his worn-out gamer chair looking at me like he's a straight-up Matrix agent. I give it a chance, though. I break the silence, and I'm just like, "Have you seen everything Victoria's been doing?" And this guy ignores my question, then asks me a question as if he rehearses being mysterious and wise. And he goes, "You know what these are?" While he's holding up the pair of night vision goggles that I saw him wearing the night before. And I amuse him by answering what I think they are, even though I know he has some type of snide, slick answer for me. I just go, "They're night vision goggles." And he goes, No, these aren't your average night vision goggles. I saw that coming from a mile away. He's about to tell me the exact correction that I got wrong. Here comes a snide over explanation of a specific object, as if I'm just a civilian dimwit and he's some high-level secret agent with incredible information. And he continues, these are my grandfather's night vision goggles that he handed down to me. My grandfather fought in the Vietnam War and he told me all about the wild things that he witnessed. But he never would talk about these. I only got to learn about these when he passed. He left me the goggles and a note. And the note instructed me to take these to the woods or a jungle or on a mountain, specifically at night. And he told me to put them on. But he told me to not do it until I was ready to become a man. So I waited a few years until I felt ready. And then I took them out to the Grand Canyon. And I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting to see red. Then this dude started laughing as if he just told a joke, and then he continued to explain it. I didn't see red like I was mad, but I do see red like whenever I fight, but that's not the point. But like for real, like if I start seeing red, bodies start dropping. That's not the point. My internal thought while this dude is explaining how bodies start dropping when he sees red with clearly no fight experience whatsoever is you look like you can be blown away by the wind. And it is very clear that your diet is Mountain Dew, Oreos, and Hot Pockets with Cheez Whiz. But I let him live in his fantasy where he's some type of action hero dropping bodies with spinning heel kicks. And I let him keep talking. And he continues, he goes, when I put these on, I didn't see any green. I only saw red. These are the first edition night vision goggles that the army banned. My grandfather smuggled them out of the war and left them for me so I could see the truth. You could see into a different world with these on. You could see past the veil. Me and my family were completely alone at a camping spot near the Grand Canyon. But when I put these on, I saw them and they were everywhere. They were flying, crawling, hiding in trees, floating above us. There's a world that is on top of our world and everybody's acting like it's not there. And in the note that my grandfather left me, he told me that all of the soldiers called these things fays. He told me that deep in the jungle, in the heart of the war, the soldiers would communicate with them. And once the fays knew the soldiers could see them, the fays also wanted to communicate with them. They would tell the soldiers, my grandpa included, little things about the future. They started with small things, little predictions to gain the soldiers' trust, and they were never wrong. And once the soldiers fully believed them that they knew the future, the fays went on and told the soldiers that they were going to lose the war. And the word spread like wildfire that it was predetermined that we were going to lose the Vietnam War. And once everybody knew the prediction, the willingness to fight, the fire in the troops was completely gone. The higher-ups caught word of why the troops were losing their willingness to fight. They found out about the fays that the soldiers were communicating with, so they tried to confiscate every pair of these to cut off communication and continue the war going forward. They unintentionally gave all of their ground troops access to another world. And I'm standing there, I'm letting this kid finish, because it was a good story, but I've read plenty about the Vietnam War. And I'm pretty sure we lost because the Viet Cong were incredible at jungle warfare, and it was just a nasty war that we really couldn't get done. It definitely wasn't because red goggle entities brought down the morale of our troops. It was because the terrain was so horrible, and the Viet Cong knew it like the back of their hands, and they had various traps. But this kid continues, and he goes, the last thing that my grandfather said in his note was, we didn't know it then, but they can not only predict the future, but they can change yours. They grant wishes, but you need something with equal value to offer them in exchange. And nothing in this world is more valuable than freedom. That's why I risked my life for this country. Freedom. So if you trap one, they can give you everything that you want in this world in exchange for their freedom. So I reply with what I think this kid wants to hear, and I say, wow, that's really cool, man. What's your name? And this dude replies, call me K. It's safer that we don't use names. And I was like, yeah, okay, very cool. You could call me D if we're doing code names, fun code names. Let's go ahead. Just call me D. So K, I thought that you were also trying to stop that Victoria lady from vandalizing everybody's house. That's the only reason I'm here. And K looked at me like I was the biggest moron on this planet. His facial expression told me that he thought I could not comprehend the vast knowledge that he had just bestowed upon me. And his next rant backed up the look on his face. This kid goes, you really don't understand, do you? It's all right in front of you, kid, but it seems like you can't put it together. Let me make this real simple for you, D. Victoria's the one that leads us to the phase. All we gotta do is go catch it. I cut him off really quick because he just contradicted himself and I couldn't handle his patronizing for one more second. I go, sorry Kay, I thought maybe I misheard you here, maybe you could correct this for me. I thought the Fays were everywhere when you put on those goggles. Why do we need Victoria to bring us to them if you could see them everywhere? And he could tell I was giving him some very legitimate sarcasm back, and he goes, they're everywhere when you go in the middle of nowhere. You know, they tend to stay away from civilization. I had another sweet comeback in the barrel to tear through his logic. I go, clear this one up for me, Kay. If there's so many out there in the middle of nowhere, why wouldn't you go there to catch them? And I said that because it is the obvious question and the obvious answer. Why do you need to follow this little woman-child criminal around to catch your Fays when the wilderness is filled with them? You said you saw all of them at the Grand Canyon. If you're going to catch a fish, don't you go to a lake that's teeming with fish? And this was the first time that he looked visibly angry. Like, he was very upset with the fact that I was giving pushback and not respecting his overarching knowledge of this entire situation. He was looking at me like I was one of the bullies that definitely picked on him back in the day. And he gave me a comeback with a fresh, nasty tone to it. He goes, would you stick your hand in a beehive to catch a bee, or would you find one that was far away from its home, far away from its friends? These things can kill you, especially if there's a lot around, and they'll enjoy every second of it. Victoria over there, the girl that you're obsessed with, acts like these things are her little buddies. But I know what they really are. They're just little devils that are only good for their wishes. That last thing he said, even though he was being very rude and annoying, it piqued my interest a bit. So I said, so you told Victoria about the Fays that you could see as well, and you're mad because she didn't want to help you catch one? I was trying to understand the dynamic of their relationship because I was clearly entering something with some history. It felt like when you get a new job and you enter the workspace and everybody seems normal for the first week until some of your coworkers start letting you in on the drama that's been boiling over for a few years. I was not from this area, but this odd man-child clearly had beef with this odd woman-child from down the road. So after a long, annoyed inhale, Kay finally answers my question. Victoria could see the ones that I can't see. Apparently the red goggles can only see one half of the other world, but the ones that she says are the good ones are always around her helping her. And they're the reason that she survived her accident. She told me that she ran into the street to save her Fae from one of the bad ones. And now they teach her tricks to keep the bad Fae away. Little petty sayings and how to make talismans to protect people's homes. She drives away all of the Fae that I could see, and her Fae give her a head start whenever a bad Fae enters the neighborhood. She's the only thing stopping me from my destiny. Up until that last rant that he did, I didn't believe a word he said. This dude was weird, and this was like an odd story that it seemed as if he had nothing really going on in his life. He was significantly older than me, probably like 25, and he was making up this lore that made himself feel important. But the one thing that I found very interesting was the fact that he said the Fays were the reason that Victoria survived her accident. And the cop from the other night that told us about her accident referred to her as a miracle. And another very interesting thing that he said was that they teach her little tricks to keep the bad Fae away. He said talisman and like little sayings. And I immediately thought about that little wooden thing that I found behind our AC unit. The wooden block that had carvings in it. And then those hieroglyphs that she drew in chalk while she was like mumbling to herself. And then the last thing that he mentioned that stood out was that the good Fae, her Fae, give her a heads up on when the bad Fae enter the neighborhood. And it made me think, she always beats the ring notification by 5 minutes. I thought it was her committing the crime, but if that's true, she just has a heads up to try to go stop it. It's either that or she is a crazy deranged woman child that has fully convinced this other odd, crazy, deranged man-child that they're both in contact with otherworldly entities, and this is what gives their life purpose. And these two are just battling it out at odds for the favor of these Fays. Either way, I needed out of this kid's room, and I was not planning on asking to leave, especially after he did that scare tactics bit on me. I was pissed at this kid. I was pretty positive that the only reason he had me climb in through the window was to do that scare tactics bit, so I didn't care if there were anybody else home. I was just gonna walk straight out his front door. I did not care. I did not care if he was in trouble. I did not care if he couldn't have company at the time. I was done with this kid. So without giving him any notice, I swing open his bedroom door and I march out the front of his house. He tried to command me to stop like he was in charge of me sitting on his throne, worn out gamer chair, as if I respected his orders even remotely. But he gave up when he saw that I couldn't care less. So I cross the street, I get back into my house, and I watch from my window Victoria fulfilling her daily missions. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's true about this? If any part of what he said is true, let me get to the bottom of it. What is true here? So I'm just hanging around the house, and eventually, after a few hours, I see Kay coming over to my house, knocks on my door. I open the door, I'm like, dude, what do you want? And he goes, it's going down tonight. And he tells me that I could be there when he catches one if I want. I'm looking at this kid so confused, but I gotta know a couple more details, so I go, how are you expecting to do it? And this kid reaches into the reusable tote bag that you would take to like a Costco if you didn't want to take one of those cardboard boxes. He reaches into it and pulls out a chainmail net. And this kid tells me that the Fae can't escape from iron. So if he could get close enough to it tonight and toss it over it, it won't be able to escape from this specific net. So I'm looking this kid up and down, trying to figure out how this kid believes what he's saying. And while I'm drinking him in, I see under his hoodie, because he's wearing a hoodie now because he's undercover, he's wearing a chainmail shirt under this hoodie as well. Like he's in medieval times or something. I cut him off and I just tell him, dude, like, if you're gonna help me catch Victoria so she stops doing all of the weird crimes she's doing in this area, I'll come with you. But I'm definitely not coming with you to fulfill your weird Lord of the Rings style quest. Because to be honest, I was pissed that Victoria cut our AC. Even if there was something else behind it, she was there. I feel like she cut our tubes with a dull switchblade, and I've been sweating every night since. I wanted my get back. And this kid Kay scoffs at me, basically telling me that I'm about to miss the biggest opportunity of my life, and storms off with his tote bag filled with an iron fishnet. And I didn't tell him this, but to be realistic, I probably wouldn't have been able to go out that night with him anyway, because my mom was going to set the alarm and I was going to be stuck in the house once the sun went down. But I wasn't going to give Kay the satisfaction of knowing that my mom had me on lockdown and just give him more ammunition to talk down to me as if he was this all-knowing adult with free reign to go on quests. And even though I was considering it, like, could I sneak out? Could I figure out a way to get out? I gave up on it once my mom came home, because I could see in her face that the long work days were wearing on her, and if the last thing I wanted to do was get on her bad side when she was like that. I gave a half effort to continue finding an opening in the alarm system, but if she caught me sneaking out while she was in that state, overworked, overtired, away from home, she would have my head, so it wasn't worth the risk. I settled in to watch some shows and just ignore the fairy tale life that's going on outside, and my mom went to bed because she needed the rest. I even muted the ring notifications because there was no point. I wasn't getting out. And after about an hour, I get up, I stroll over to the kitchen to get myself a beverage, and I strike gold. My mom left her phone on the island in the kitchen, and she never does that. She usually uses her phone as an alarm. She doesn't let me have access to it. She takes it up into her room and she locks her door. But there it was, on the island, ripe for the picking. And I didn't have to guess her password. I knew that password by heart, because if my sisters ever wanted to tell on me for anything, or my dad wanted to fill her in on what my teachers had said I'd been doing that week, I'd just get my hands on her phone, get in there, delete the messages, and act like nothing happened. And my sisters or my dad would think that she just ignored it because she was too busy with work, and like, keep those problems to yourself, you solve it. Also, if you think your child doesn't know your phone password, I promise they do. Hand them your phone and watch how fast that thing pops open. So I'm in my mom's phone after I plug in her password that I memorized months ago, and I'm looking for anything that could help me get out of this house. And I see a little blue app that says ADT that matches the logo that's on the alarm system. So I click on this app, and right on the homepage, after I clicked login that already had her saved credentials in there very conveniently, is a big red button that says click to disarm. And I risk it all. I don't know if the alarm system is going to be like, disarmed, disarmed. I click this thing, and if something happens, I'm going to go pretend to be asleep on the couch, put her phone exactly where I found it, and she's just going to think it's a glitch. So I tap this thing, and silence. Nothing happens. The red circle turns green. Alarm disarmed. I was good to go. Now all I had to do was wait for Victoria, wait for somebody to make a move, and I could slip out and be a part of the action. But when I checked my phone for the ring notifications that I had been ignoring, I was already too late. The action had already started. Something had been going on 15 minutes earlier in the park at the edge of the neighborhood. So in my head, I'm like, they both must be over there already. I know that Kay was going to follow Victoria regardless to try to catch one of the Fays with his silly little net. And I know Victoria is out doing what she always does. So I'm late to the party. I got to get to it. I slip out the back door because I know that my mom will check the ring notifications the next day and see me leaving the front door. So I got to go out the back sliding door, hop over the cinder block fence into the neighbor's yard, leave through his front gate, go around the area so my mom doesn't see me fleeing in the distance, and go around the block to this park that I know that they're at. The only thing I thought to grab before I left was a flashlight because I knew how dark it got in that area. So before even thinking, the only thing I'm wielding is this little flashlight, and I'm walking through this unfamiliar neighborhood because I don't really go out at night. There aren't nearly as many streetlights as I'm used to. Like, Phoenix gets dark. This neighborhood is private. Everybody's lights are off. Nobody has any form of lighting on the outside of their house outside of like those like decorative Christmas lights that kind of make a gazebo look good. And there's areas of this neighborhood that are just pitch black. So I'm immediately a little bit spooked. I got out there on an impulse. And once I was out there, I was half regretting it. But I knew something was going down. I knew I could walk up on Victoria doing something and catch her once and for all. So I'm going around the neighborhood the long way to try to approach the neighborhood park in an angle that I feel is advantageous. Because this park has a downslope on all angles, it's almost like a really big ditch filled with grass. Like when you're walking around the neighborhood, you look down into the field where people walk their dogs and play fetch and kids play sports. It's like 5 feet down a light slope. But from this angle of the park, the slope is almost like 10 feet. So I just felt like approaching from that angle gave me the biggest advantage and the best vantage point to see things going on. But once I got there to the position that I felt like was going to be the best, I'm looking into this dark black abyss that is this park that I'm used to seeing being this like lush, green, fun area for all of the neighbors to have activities in. But at night, there is not one source of light. It is completely black. You could not tell if somebody was sitting in this park. So I'm standing on the top of this slope and I have no other option to go in. And I know that I need to go in because I hear subtle whispering, subtle sounds like somebody's in this park, and I hear light flutes coming from somewhere in the source of this darkness. So I take a deep breath, I turn on my flashlight, I put it right near my face so it's following my vision, so I'm never looking off into the darkness, illuminating some other spot. I want it to follow where I'm looking so I don't run into anything. And I'm waddling through this black park with absolutely no bearings on what is around me. And I'm trying to see if there's anything. I'm trying to find where the sound is coming from. And I'm waddling around this park for 5 minutes, just staying on the edges initially, but I know internally that I gotta get to the middle. I know it's probably coming from there. So I turn, I start walking towards the middle of this field, and as I'm turning my flashlight to the left, I see Kay, and his face is illuminated by the shine of my flashlight. I can't even see his legs. I could only see his shoulders and his arms, and his face grimacing in pain. It was almost as if somebody was tasing him, like he was seizing up and his arms were convulsing, and they were just moving in this weird pattern, and there was so much fear in his eyes, and he was breathing through his teeth like he couldn't open his jaw. It looked like there was electric currents going through his muscles, and he was seizing up and twitching, or like somebody stuck a syringe in his arm filled with rattlesnake venom and it was corroding him from the inside. He was completely contorted, and my flashlight had the ability to make the scope of light get a little bit wider. It made it less bright in the circle, but I was able to see a little bit more of him if I twisted the front of the flashlight. So that's what I did to see his entire body. And I saw that his arms looked as if they were strung up like he was a puppet, like somebody was puppeteering him from above. And as I'm taking in what I'm I'm seeing, I realize that whatever flutes I was hearing, it seemed as if his body was following along with the music of these flutes, and he was doing some type of disturbing dance. And the flutes got louder and louder as I got closer to him, as if the sound of music was coming from him. And he wouldn't reply to me when I would ask him what was wrong. I was trying to figure out how I could help him or what situation he was in, but all he was doing was grimacing like he was in pain. He looked like he was not in control of his body whatsoever. And as I get up to him, when I'm about 2 or 3 feet away, I don't want to get fully close to touch him because I don't really know what's going on. I finally look down at his feet, and it looks as if they're hovering like an inch or an inch and a half off the ground, as if he's actually being strung up by strings. I had no idea what to do in this situation. He was giving me no signs of any way I could help him, so I frantically look around to see if I could find some type of stick, and in that situation, I just wanted to wave the stick over his arms to see if there was something stringing him up, because once I was close to him, it was clear he was not in control of his body. It was like somebody had a hook on each of his elbows, and his arms were just going up and down like he was some type of possessed ventriloquist dummy. So as I'm frantically twirling around, trying to find a stick on the floor, I see the other person that's there. And it's Victoria, sitting crisscross, a little bit off to his right, leaning back and forth, mumbling something to herself as she's drawing on a big stone with chalk. She was rocking back and forth aggressively, drawing on this stone the same way she was drawing on our driveway, and her face had that same expression of determination that she always has when she's flying around the neighborhood. So my body starts filling with rage because I am catching her in the act. In my head, every assumption I had about her is completely true because I'm seeing her do it. The determination she has as she's drawing on this rock with no empathy, no sympathy for Kay, clearly in horrible pain right in front of her. She's just in her own world, doing her own thing. So I start yelling at her like, stop doing this. Whatever you're doing to him, whatever you're doing to the people of this neighborhood, you need to stop it. And this woman child looks up at me from the floor, just like she's annoyed with me, and she just goes, I told him to stop following me. This girl was so much worse than I thought. Maybe Kay was right. Maybe she was privy to some type of magic that she was using to punish Kay like this. So I continued berating her with threats, trying to get her to stop whatever she was doing to him. And she's still shaking her head as if she's annoyed with me and I'm just this nuisance, this little fly in her life. And as I'm standing there trying to figure out what to do, completely engulfed by darkness, only able to see in the dull light of my dollar store flashlight, she starts to lean forward and grabs one of the rocks that's in a circle around Kay's feet and swiftly exchanges one of these rocks with the stone that she had drawn on with her chalk that clearly has her odd hieroglyphs on it. And I didn't notice until that exact moment that there was a perfect circle of rocks surrounding Kay, clearly placed there intentionally. Then Victoria stood up, got as close as she could to this circle of rocks, and reached in towards Kay, directly over the stone that she had written on with chalk, and grabbed his shirt before slowly pulling him towards her. And the way she moved her body was as if she was trying to reach her arm through like a fence post, or in this case, through a gap of a force field, as if the stone that she put in was the only way she was going to be able to reach through to him. And by the way she pulled him, the way she grabbed his arm and was able to pull his body towards her, towards this gap that she had created, it confirmed to me that he was hovering in the air, because she was pulling him and it wasn't as if he was stepping forward, it was as if he was gliding towards her. And she started taking steps back, pulling him through this gap, and his body shimmied through it as if there was a legitimate force field on either side of the stone that she placed, and she yanked him out of it until he fell onto the floor at her feet and he got control of his body. But what he did was not stand up, not run. He curled up into a ball and started sobbing and crying like he was a child. He was freaking out and calling for his mom, and it wasn't like one of those old war movies where one of the soldiers is about to die and he's calling for his mom. It was like a little kid begging for his mommy. And the weirdest part was that his voice was almost unrecognizable. I was used to his deep, all-knowing, fake bravado voice, but now he's talking with a light tone, really begging for his mom. It was like he regressed in maturity. Not that he was incredibly mature for his age. He was full of it, but this was different. It was as if he had regressed in legitimate age and he was a child. Everything about his voice and the expression on his face was filled with a childlike innocence. It was very different from his fake, mature, red pill bravado that I was used to. So I move my flashlight to this dude that's just curled up in a ball, and I put it on Victoria's face, and I demand to know what just happened. And in her childlike voice, she says, "They tricked him too. He's like me now." Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please let me know if you want the full expansion of this story. There are some other juicy details, but that is the majority of that story. But please let me know, because we will listen and we'll make more of that one for you. I always appreciate you watching. I always appreciate you liking and subscribing. I am so excited to continue creating for you. We'll see you soon. Probably less than a week. And if you like this video, YouTube thinks you would also like this one, so go ahead and click it.